Okay. Do we want to kick off?
We can, yeah. Should we start it? Sure.
Yeah.
My name is Bill Ferentz, and I'm the senior designer and illustrator at the Black Sheep Agency.
I'm Joe Skillman, the creative director at Black Sheep. And if you don't know Black Sheep, we are a brand strategy and creative agency with the goal of activating people around things that matter. And we're also a B Corp.
And this is the second in a design series, design discussion. It's called Offset Path, where we talk about brands and creative campaigns that Joe and I have built for social impact.
Mm-hmm. And for those unfamiliar, Offset Path is a function in Adobe Illustrator design software that we have that is largely used for putting borders around things. But it's also a neat nod to what it's like to design for social impact, because you're essentially traveling down a path that's maybe not the common one. So the offset path.
Exactly. And like last time, you were invited to ask us any questions about today's brand or in general at any point by typing them in the app here on Instagram. They can be professional questions, personal questions, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and we'll try to field them as we go. If we can't manage that, we'll try to do a round at the end and attempts to answer any that we missed. And while we're on the subject, Bill did this to me last time, so I think it's going to be a thing now.
Okay.
So I'm punishing him in return. But he surprised me with a question, so I have a good one for you. What is the last thing you did that you were very bad at?
Very bad at. We have been making a lot more coffee at home for reasons that we all know. And we have like a pour over carafe thing, and I can just not get the hang of it. And so every time the coffee is just has either like too much flavor or there's like not enough flavor, and Martin has to make coffee every time now because I always mess it up. So
I feel like this is maybe a YouTube. It's like a solvable YouTube problem.
That's true.
It's fine. I don't know how to do pour over. I'm French press all the way, but I've also worked in a lot of coffee shops, so maybe I should know how to do pour over. Okay, so to pivot, in light of current events being what they are, the extremely top of mind Black Lives Matter movement, the completely preventable death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, we wanted to talk about something that was at least a bit topical to connect with how we're feeling. And last year, we designed a brand focused on diversity, inclusion, and civic action, namely voting. So we thought that might be a good focus for this episode. I'm talking about the brand developed by Black Sheep for the League of Women Voters of Houston, or as our office calls it, the League.
The League.
So some background. As of this year, the League is exactly 100 years old. It was founded in Chicago the same time the 19th Amendment was ratified, and has been an activist, grassrootsy organization since day one. So their mission, and I am paraphrasing this directly from their website, is to engage all people in political processes and civic engagement by providing both opportunities and information to participate in democracy. So they're nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and basically they just want everyone voting. That's especially relevant now because we're in an election year. And learned this today. In 2019 alone, the League registered 31,000 people to vote. That is not nationwide. That is like Houston.
Okay, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed. Katie gave me that nice little statistic, and I was like, is this Houston? Or like maybe like the state? And she was like, no, that's here. Dang, so they're really out there doing some things.
And the work the League is doing right now also helps make sure the voting process is fair and the public is informed on all the issues, including how to vote, when to vote, and where to vote. It's an incredibly important issue, especially right now. So everyone at Black Sheep sort of jumped at the opportunity to give this chapter of the organization its own voice and vision that reflects the Houston community. The problem was they didn't quite have a clear direction strategically or visually, so we established kind of starting off some overarching goals for this project. One was to develop a unique message for the Houston chapter that articulates the collective vision and showcases their passion, values, and goals. The second is to balance the League of Women Voters, so the name women, with messages, tactics, and visuals that proactively make it clear that the League is for everyone. So that encourages more participation with a more diverse and youthful demographic. And the last was to evolve their programming to offer more engaging, community-centric events that educate and encourage participation in civic dialogue. So everything that we worked on had to ladder up to these objectives.
Yeah, side note, goals are a wonderful thing, and if you put them all together in one document, you can call it a creative brief, which will save your butt sometimes with creative projects. So one of these days, maybe we'll talk more about briefs, but for now, show us some things.
I will do that. I am going to flip my camera around so I can show you some things. So first off, I want to mention real quick that there is a League of Women Voters national brand, which is mainly, they use this logo here. And this mark, I believe, was developed internally in their own organization, and it's modified for each chapter to include the city or area it represents. And I think most major cities have a chapter of the League, and each chapter is responsible for their own marketing and own design. So this is where we came in, enter the Black Sheep Agency. So this, I'm going to slowly kind of scroll through this so you can see it, hopefully, is the design direction we created for the League of Women Voters Houston chapter. There we go. Trying to frame it.
Good. You're succeeding.
Am I good? Okay.
Yeah.
So this kind of visually embodies the ideas and values from the current messaging of the organization. The League is active and informed. The League is nonpartisan. The League is knowledgeable. The League is fair and trustworthy. The League encourages participation in government from all walks of life. And the League invites all people to come together, activate our communities, and build a movement of inclusive government for all. So you kind of see all this messaging across the design pieces in the buttons, and these social graphics, some sort of like a pop-up display banner, all the swag we designed. But I think it really kind of shines in these posters and buttons we created. So these are just kind of mocked up to show how awesome they can be in the real world. And then we've got some button designs too. So we actually ended up using the color palettes straight from the national brand, which luckily ended up working out pretty well. I was a little hesitant at first because the purples and yellows are a little bit traditional, but I think when they're paired with these sort of interesting fonts and our illustrations, it actually kind of feels really harmonious and kind of exciting. So this new brand encourages conversation, activity, and momentum, and shows that everyone should participate in government. And the design is almost kind of meant to evoke the energy of rallies and marches. So like there's this poster that's like says communicate, collaborate, cultivate, accelerate, participate, debate. It's almost like you would hear people chanting that while marching through the street. So it's kind of very like interesting. It's a diverse brand, and there's lots of illustration, which I am super happy about.
Of course you are.
Yes.
Bill can't not illustrate something. Sometimes I have to pull him back. I'm like, not everything has to be illustrated.
I always try to push for it though. So I think that covers the what and the why. So we can go ahead, I think, and jump in and kind of talk about the how we got there. And I think the first thing I want to talk about here is those buttons that I was showing. Because initially for this brand, I was focusing, like in some earlier design iterations, I was focusing really heavily exclamation points and sort of this like angled text, because I wanted to capture the momentum and action of participating in the government. And I was kind of relying a lot on some use of historical imagery, like from the women's suffrage movement and kind of back in those times. But after some reviews with you, Joe, and Amy, we realized it wasn't unique enough or hitting the goals for what we wanted the brand to be. And kind of the use of like historical imagery maybe isn't necessarily the right thing if you're trying to talk about the future of the organization. So I ended up going back to the drawing board and I got out my sketchbook. But before I started, you gave me one piece of critical creative direction, and that was the word buttons.
Mm. Well, I go to a lot of estate sales because I love like antiques and vintage and like weird home decor and that kind of thing. And so for years, I've been seeing all of these historical political buttons, and they're super cool. Buttons like you would pin to your shirt or a backpack or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're these really graphic designs with a lot of typography, like usually just one or two colors. And for whatever reason, like no one ever just has one button. Like anyone who has political buttons has tons of them. And they're even cooler when you see them in group because you have kind of this blend of all these strong statements and they're all different sizes and they're just really interesting social artifacts, really. So they have this long history in government and community as far as showing support. They can be like as timely or as topical as you want them to be. You can share them with other people. You can pair them with other buttons and make a bunch of statements at once. And that was just like the direction for me from like the second I started thinking about this.
Yeah.
And we could use them as our brand visuals to create patterns and collages and like produce actual buttons, this swag.
So there was a lot of background to you suggesting buttons, and then you said that word to me. So I was armed with the word buttons, and I had my sketchbook and some markers, and I actually sat down in a coffee shop, and I started to write and sketch some ideas, and just sort of make connections between the messaging and the design. And I'm actually going to show my monitor again, so I can kind of show you.
I want to mentally prepare everyone that Bill is a better note taker than the rest of us probably are. Fine. Doesn't mean you can't also be an amazing designer. My notes and sketches look like absolute crap. And I still manage. So I'm always very impressed with his notes.
Cool. So these are just like some photos I took of what my sketchbook looked like during this process. But I've just kind of come to realize that having my sketchbook is my key to finding ideas. It lets me kind of quickly play with text and images to see how they can come together to start to become a design. I also find it helpful to actually write out what I'm thinking because I start to see certain words jump out. You can kind of even see this right here if it focuses, but I wrote down the words cultivate, collaborate, communicate, accelerate, and that ended up turning into the actual poster design. And you can kind of see some of the early stages of like the speech bubble elements. The buttons are showing up. There's like hands and people marching. Like these are even like some early button sketches. But it all just kind of like, for me, starts here. And I just really just kind of love writing and seeing words show up and how words can kind of pair with graphics and illustrations to like create this design language. So everything. I actually ended up even using like the same colors from the brand with my markers, which was helpful.
Oh man, you overachiever. I also love that you give the buttons so much credit for kicking off this creative concept when they're only like 20% of the visuals that you use. And all of it is beautiful. And he even did like the copywriting for this brand, essentially, like the posters and stuff. He just kind of jumped in and was like, I think it should say this. And sure enough, that's what it says. And it was great. And it was beautiful. But yeah, that's how kind he is about crediting other people is I'm like, buttons. And he's like, everything else. But I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm just like a big fan of giving credit where credit is due. And I'd just say that what makes the team at Black Sheep so great is that we all kind of share accomplishments and we share successes. It just kind of makes us a really great positive team to be on.
I do appreciate that about everyone. Everyone really puts in the effort to credit and call out contributions like that. Yeah, nice.
Um, so I took all these ideas here and translated to them to kind of all those designs that you saw before. So it became the portrait illustrations, it became the poster designs, all those buttons. And then I even kind of just like took some of our like traditional, typical patriotic stars and stripes and turned those into like a variety of button graphics. And it all, like I said, kind of comes together to tell the story of the league.
Yeah, one of the kind of small details that I saw you do with this concept was in a couple places where we talk about like membership or new members or join now or whatever, and you would include the back of a button with the little metal fastener, like we were inviting people to pick it up and put it on, or envision themselves wearing it instead of just looking at the front of it.
Right.
Anyways, while we're talking about joining, I am going to give part of the League of Women Voters spiel. So first of all, in order to join the league, you do not have to be a woman. You actually don't even have to be a registered voter. It's open to literally everyone who wants to encourage civic engagement, and obviously looking and feeling like they were genuinely open to everyone was a big part of what we were trying to build with the brand. Anyway, to join, you can visit their website, lwvhouston.org. And you just go to the / membership page, pay your annual membership dues. They have a few different levels. There's even one for students, and you just sign right up. So it's pretty straightforward. And then the dues fund not just your local league, but also the national one, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Like you're helping out both.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Thanks for mentioning that. So we talked about the design. Now I think we can talk a little bit more about the implementation and how it was used. So we ended up designing some pretty like typical materials. They're a grassroots organization, so we did some pretty standard things for them, like postcards, stickers, and buttons. But we did a few event type pieces too. We did like a tablecloth design that really used those button elements. And then we did some pop-up banners, and then some more of the interesting pieces were actually we did some like metro bus pamphlets, and then we did some ads that actually went in the buses, which was a cool way to kind of meet the community in a different way and introduce the league and voting information in a bit more of like a direct way, like not just online. You're actually seeing this out in the world and part of like your daily life. And then I think I also want to talk about the like flexibility and ease of use with this brand. The buttons just ended up being a really effective design element, and the illustrations with people kind of just really integrated really easily. I'll admit that I kind of have a bit of a habit of wanting design and illustration to be very like kind of complex and layered and lots of little details. Which you know, Joe, you've seen it. And I think that just kind of stems from my illustration background. But for this one, it really needed to be a bit more refined and restrained, just so it was like easy to use and implement. And so as, you know, our design team and even working with, you know, possibly contract or freelance designers, if the league, I think the league actually has a volunteer designer now.
Yeah,
so they're able to jump in and work on this and be able to kind of implement all the designs and illustrations and have it be cohesive and effective. But I'm just really proud of that.
Which is something that we try really hard to do at Black Sheep, is to build out really extensive systems that can kind of pivot with current events, the state of the world, kind of have their own personality, that sort of thing. So they need to be really large, but then they also do need to be really, really flexible,
Hmm.
so that other people can use them. Because yeah, when you're an impact organization, a lot of the time you might be, you know, building something and then handing it off to someone else who then
Right.
has to go use it. And so you can't be the only person who can work in your design because you're the only person who can do that illustration
Right.
style, et cetera, et cetera. And so yeah, I felt like we landed in a very happy medium here. We kind of had a toolkit of illustrations that could be used in a lot of ways in a lot of places across the board that were just kind of already built by Bill.
Hmm.
And then the buttons kind of provide this like endless rearranging that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I like that design element. I think it works really well. Um, and then, so we typically do get quite a bit of like praise from our clients for our work.
We know them well. We go through a
Yeah.
long discovery process.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we nail it at the end.
And so they were really happy with how this turned out and how it's being used and how it's being implemented. And this is actually kind of a special case because Naliza, Katie, and I were actually all received awards of recognition for the work on this brand from the league. So that made it feel really special and important. And I just appreciate that acknowledgement from them, and just happy that it's just being really well received.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's beautiful. Um, okay, so what did we learn?
A lot. Um, this project made me think when we were starting it. I'm not originally from Houston. I grew up near Detroit and then moved to Minneapolis and then moved down to Houston. But I just have learned that what makes Houston so great, for sure, is like our diversity here. We talked about this before, but Houston is the most diverse city in the country, right? um, and what government and politics are in desperate need of is diversity. I think, it's slowly changing and getting better, but things can definitely improve. Um, but since Houston is so diverse, like we should be the leader and be setting the standard for what government can look like. Like the future of like democracy, the future of government should start here in Houston. And that's kind of what was like the launch pad for a lot of the language and a lot of the I guess like the momentum that the design builds. And that diversity was something that I wanted reflected throughout the brand, and in particular the illustration. And illustrating diversity, so like diversity of age, gender, skin color, body type, can be a little tricky because you want to be really respectful and very considerate, but it's just really important. So part of the league uses these like hand illustrations and these different portraits and people, and I wanted to make sure that they just showed different skin tones and different body types. And I'm really happy the way this turned out and how it's been implemented. And I think just like that type of just like including diversity in my illustration has become kind of second nature for me when I'm drawing, and when I'm sketching. And it's something that we always at Black Sheep consider while we're working. It's like in all the work we do, from the research and even like it shows up in the writing, and the photography and illustration. It's just essential to design work now and moving forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if y'all follow Bill on Instagram, but his personal illustration projects, unlike the rest of us who can like sort of draw, but not really, and we all avoid drawing people, like our lives depend on it, like Bill loves drawing people.
I
So
do.
he constantly is drawing people and people in groups, which is like the number one thing that most illustrators hate drawing. And they're always really diverse, like, body type, shape,
Mhm.
and color and hairstyle and age, and it's something that I always appreciate just about his personal work too. So it was nice to kind of see that come into
Mhm.
this brand. It's
Yeah.
nice. Um, Another one of the things that was like a little bit challenging with this brand is that you know, the balance of red and blue, because the League is a non-partisan organization, which meant that we had to be very careful with kind of the like blue left, red right color combinations, and not like trying to skew them in one direction or another by leaning too heavily on one or the other, even just through sheer accident. And so we definitely kept an eye on that, but it was really nice that the League of Women Voters, the national brand, was already
Mhm.
using purple, which is of
Yeah.
course what happens when blue and red come together. I think we ended up borrowing that exact shade of purple too. Like we
Yes.
were like, oh great, this is already here. We're just gonna snag that, and it worked out well.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, the purple and the yellow too is actually from their brand standards.
Also national, yeah,
Yeah. So,
awesome.
yeah, really cool. Um, this is like a little bit more now, I mean, topical now, but another thing that I've learned recently, and something a lot of people have been sharing on social, is that there are actually millions of people who can't vote because of a felony conviction. And there's a statistic that says one of every 13 African Americans has lost their voting rights because of a felony disenfranchisement. Um, and I think that's important to point out because, yes, everyone who needs to register to vote should register. And yes, everyone who can vote needs to vote. But we're seeing now that with protesting and marching and rallying, it is very important to get things changed too. Like we're seeing a lot more legislation come up because of these Black Lives Matters marches and protests, and I think it's important to point out that that works. Voting
Yeah.
works, and protesting works.
So, oh, you've got a compliment on your new Instagram follower. Um, so this was also in the email of kind of fact that Katie sent me, who is the account director for the league. But I learned today from her that the league actually registered voters at George Floyd's funeral.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so you know, if you're mad, you can vote about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just it's I don't know. It's important to see these things happening and seeing all the ways people are getting involved, and just I'm very hopeful for change. Like I'm trying to like stay positive and hopeful that there will be some change.
Oh, yeah, Katie's giving us an additional note. She says incarcerated voters
Oh,
can and should vote by mail. I'm assuming that's not
okay.
felony convictions, but
Mhm.
other people who still have the right to vote and are incarcerated
Okay.
get the
Are they
mail
just coming
ballot.
in the are those
Huh?
coming in the comments?
Are they coming in the what? Sorry.
In the comments?
Hmm? Can you
Okay.
not see a comment?
I don't think so.
Oh no. Maybe
So
it's just because I'm the host and I can see them.
yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna need to scroll back through and make sure
Yeah.
that I can see anything that we may have missed,
Yeah.
questions wise. But
Yeah.
I think
If
we're to that
anyone's
point.
watching, yeah. If anyone watching has questions, you can type them in now. And then I think Joe's going to take a look real quick to see if there's anything we can answer. I don't know if you can scroll through and see anything, but
I will try to not knock my phone off of the little wooden that is holding it. That's what's holding my phone. Um, yes. And while I'm doing that, I have some league info for you. You can find the league on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All three have the same handle, LWV Houston. Also, primary runoffs are coming. If you're already registered to vote, you can vote in them because unfortunately the voter registration deadline has already passed. Early voting begins June 29th. The last day to apply for a mail ballot, which we were just talking about, to get your ballot in the mail and mail it back. Because, you know, 2020 is a dumpster fire and we're still also in a pandemic and maybe you don't want to go in person to a polling place. But anyway, early voting ends July 10th. Runoff election day is July 14th. And also, Dang, y'all, there's so many comments and trying to scroll back and
Oh,
read and speak at the same time, and I'm not being very successful, but I'll get to it here in a second. Um, cool thing about Election Day on July 14th, you can vote anywhere on that day. Um, so I believe any of the polling places in Harris County, if you're registered in Harris County, you can vote at any of them. And also, the campaign announcing the Vote Anywhere initiative last year called Vote Your Way, hashtag Vote Your Way, was also a Black Sheep campaign.
it
So we
was.
really hung up on this voting stuff. That's another one that Bill built and designed. That's beautiful. So maybe we'll talk about that one day. And finally, the 411 Voters Guide published by the League will be making an appearance closer to the election. And that's a helpful document that comes in, I believe, 4 languages.
Mhm.
Okay. So now I'm scrolling because I couldn't do
Okay.
it at the same time as I was speaking.
Here, I'll show my screen again for anyone watching who hasn't seen
Yeah.
the design work.
Perfect. There we go. I could use to see more of that. Yeah, I remember the day we got those pop-up banners in, and you
Yeah,
and I were like beside ourselves,
yeah, those turned out
trying
good.
to like popping them up and being all excited, and it was a good time. You have a lot of comments in here. Citizenship and civics should be simple and basic. Super cool, clear graphics. All right, I'm bummed you couldn't see these. Marcella told you that you are a Houstonian, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Marcella.
Okay, so here's one we've got. How have you adapted your work to the new social distancing? That's from Alex. Do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I think luckily we were able to transition to working from home kind of like no problem. Like we all had like we're able to take our computers home if we needed to. Everyone's on laptops, so luckily we were all pretty well set up to do that. I just had that weird internet issue for a while, but that's been cleared up. Um, I think a lot of it has just been being so much more active just on all forms of communication. So just we're on, using Slack, on text, GroupMe. What I think's been good is that like I haven't really had any trouble um, staying motivated or like investing myself even while being at home. Like I don't find myself being too distracted or anything, but I think just like the process has changed quite a bit. Where like we would be doing a lot of brainstorming or having conversations in the office or like meeting in small groups, but now I mean we're really like jumping on Slack calls or Google Hangouts and using Zoom to do a lot of that brainstorming and just like kind of using like a lot of online sources. So Dropbox paper, like collaborative documents and collecting research and throwing inspiration in there. And I think it's like all gone so well. Like,
Yeah, it's felt really smooth. I will say creatively, I am a person, as evidenced by this particular brand, who I don't tend to get a lot of ideas from the internet. I really tend to pull ideas from like stuff that I've seen over the years, and I'm a big like road tripper and taker of small day trips and kind of a constant explorer, and I feel like that's where my ideas came from. So if we were kind of isolated for like quite a while longer than this, I might actually start to maybe feel a little bit stunted just because I'm not
yeah,
refilling that idea bank essentially. Um, so I'm glad that we're getting a little bit more flexible. And let's see, on top of that, yeah, one of the things I've really appreciated about everyone, especially in the creative team, is having that willingness to just like be suddenly available for a call
yeah,
because so many things can be lost when you're trying to type.
mm-hmm.
And so the fact that you can just reach out to anyone at a second and just be like, hey, let's talk about this instead.
Yeah.
Than popping in and we're having actual conversations. And so that to me are like the two biggest shifts. But yeah, otherwise, as far as Bill has said, like we're not suffering too much. There
Yeah.
has been some awkward like holding up of the sketchbook to the
Yeah.
camera on your computer, but
Yep.
I'm not really a sketcher. So I
Mhm.
make word lists, Bill sketches,
Yep.
and our other designer Cassidy is like more of a mood boarder. So
Mm.
we all process those things differently. Oh, Martin sent us another question.
Oh, okay.
Oh man, heck of a question, Martin. How has illustration design changed the world of impactful campaigns and communication that graphic design has been a primary identity? All right, Martin, I'm not quite following you.
I wish I could read it.
Sorry. I'll just read it all together, trying not to do any emphasis and see if that makes
Okay.
it a little smoother. How has illustration design changed the world of impactful campaigns and communication that graphic design has been a primary identity and branding? I think maybe I didn't let him post the whole thing.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like it's more like how is illustration playing a larger role rather than maybe like what would be traditional graphic design.
Sure.
I guess think it that way.
Yeah,
um,
I think you're probably right. Go to town.
um, I mean, definitely within the past few years, illustration is like had a huge, I don't know if it's resurgence is the right word, but like illustration is just showing up in everything. Um, I think what's been really great, especially just in the League of Women Voters brand, was that like them having the goal of wanting to like be a more diverse organization. It was a great use of illustration because we actually can bring in and show the type of people that the organization is and the organization like who they want to be. So that's why we're using different body shapes and skin tones and just different races and genders. But then just like overall, I think um, just like larger discussions are taking place and like a lot more people want visibility and a lot more people want and deserve representation and visibility. I mean, we're talking about the LGBTQ community and then like different minority groups. So I think illustration has a way of like really bringing those voices and those stories into the conversation more, and they can show up in brands in more kind of visible ways. That's like that's how I see it. um, and so I think a lot of when I'm bringing illustration into brands, it's because I want those voices to be seen and those people to be seen and heard. And I think that's true for a lot of impact design and impact groups.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think too that, graphic design is prone to trends just like any other
Mm-hmm.
kind of design, just like home decor,
That's true.
fashion. So I think illustration sometimes will play a varying part in that way,
Mm-hmm.
where it's more on trend at sometimes than others. But I think that we're going to be seeing more of it just for the simple reason of I think it can help with inclusivity, like Bill was saying, but
Yeah.
I think also because, we didn't have smartphones until what, like,
Mm.
I don't know, 10, 12 years
Yeah.
ago. And so people trust design and see a lack of design a lot more now than they
Okay.
used to, because you work with this device that's highly visual, highly graphic, designed around you every single day. And so I think the longer that we go and the more that we're exposed to design in our lives and in our devices just on a daily basis, the higher of expectations we're going to have for it. So I think illustration kind of fits into that. It's just
Mm-hmm.
one more way to kind of like up your game as far as good design goes, as far as standing out in a crowded marketplace goes, as far as, giving your designers something to work with. Like it's easier to have a more recognizable brand, the more pieces that you have.
Yeah,
So,
I like
oh,
that.
Martin
That's good.
confirmed we did, in fact, answer the correct question.
Okay, that's good.
Perfect. You know him well.
Yeah,
All right. I don't
I
think we have any others. I think that's it for us.
I see one more.
So, oh, what do you see? What have you got?
Um, I'm looking on Martin's phone. He's letting me see the comments. um, so, E. Trithart, that's Emma,
Mhm.
asks, any tips on reining in the urge to add a bunch of little details? I'm guessing to illustration. Another
Mm.
illustrator turned designer here who struggles with that as well. That's a
Yeah.
good question.
It is. So, one easy way is to have someone else look at it because I am that person for Bill a lot of the time. Um, but one of my other notes would just be that to see if you can indulge that side of yourself in other ways.
Hmm.
So, I don't call myself an illustrator. I do draw, I have drawn, I have illustrated campaigns, but I'm just not like fast or efficient or like varied enough in my styles to, I think, ever in the title. But something that I like to do is to like hide clever little details
Hmm.
in other parts of something. So, like there are all these interesting considerations about different pieces that we're designing that behave differently. So, for instance, like if you're designing a train wrap on the metro, like that's moving past an entire city of people. If you're designing a billboard, that's got an entire city of people moving past it. Those two things behave differently. People see them in different scenarios. And there are like tons of little things that you can do to capitalize on those differences. So,
Hmm.
I am also a big typography like nitpicker.
Yes, you
So if
are.
anything in our office is like super typographically sensitive, like I'm usually the person that gets that, and I love hiding little details and things like that there. Or sometimes little small nuances like how a print piece behaves,
Mhm.
or the way in which you would swipe through something digital. Like I just find other places to hide those details is
Yeah.
essentially what I'm saying. Like that's a wonderful quality, so don't get rid of it. But if you're trying to cram it all into the illustration, think about like where else that could live.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I will definitely say I agree with that. Like, I will end up having to maybe show you, because you are our creative director, like any sort of illustration piece and say like, is this too busy? Is this too complex? What kind of things can I remove where it still has like a really nice visual impact, but what's maybe like a little unnecessary and can be taken out. There was actually
Yeah,
another. Oh, okay. There was another version of this um, direction where actually it was like a lot more line drawings and like a bit more texturally heavy. So it like looked like almost like pencil or graphite, and it actually was taking away from the messaging because it was distracting seeing kind of all these like textural pieces and you weren't seeing the typography enough. So I think a lot, especially in design, the messaging and those letters and those words kind of have to take priority, and everything should in a way kind of sit, passenger seat to that.
yeah, kind of zooming out and being very aware of like where your eye goes first, second, third, fourth is a really helpful way to simplify your illustration as well.
I have
As far
to,
as just looking at the illustration or looking at the entire piece with type and headlines and everything.
yeah, I need you to do that for me often. Because he'll come and say like, well, I don't know where the focal point is, and I'll look at it again and say, you're right, I need to fix this. So,
Yeah, that was something I kind of like learned the hard way. Well, not necessarily the hard way, but I just like stumbled through very early on in my career. And I just finally started realizing that every time I looked at something and I liked all of the pieces, like I liked everything that was in, the poster or the Twitter cover or what the heck ever. I liked all of the pieces, but I just didn't like the arrangement. I would
yeah,
always I finally started to realize it's always a matter of scale. And the reason that that scale is so important is because like there's a psychological effect that happens in our brains where like when we're met with something and our eyes don't know where to go first, a lot of the times we feel affronted by it. We don't know where to jump in, like just like not an in point for us. Um, and so the more that you can make sure that you have given your viewer that, not only will it improve the look of your piece, but they will actually be more likely to read it because you've given them an entry.
Yeah, that's a good design tip. Something I now try to keep in mind, keep top of mind when I'm working on things.
Yeah, fortunately, it's a very learnable thing. So
Yes,
if you start realizing that that's your struggle commonly, then you can fix it. And it applies to all kinds of things too. It applies to like designing your house and designing like your outfit. It's like you need to give people something to look at first, and then second and third and fourth. Oh, thanks, Emma. All right. Martin asks if we can see the artwork again.
Okay, we can show it. And then maybe we can also do our conclusion at the same time.
Yeah. Before we run out of time and we get totally cut off, we did last time because I did not know there were time limits on IG stories or live. All right. Okay. Well, thank y'all for your questions. If you think of something after the fact, feel free to ask us later. We're not hard to find on social media, especially Instagram, for both of us. And thanks for watching and or listening. Stay safe. Look into the League of Women Voters of Houston, even if you're not a woman voter. And also, I've heard they have some cool centennial content around voter stories, both historic and current. Some nice videos that they're looking to start launching. So maybe keep an eye out.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.